Hey everyone, how's it going? Juan Dhas here, and welcome back to the lesson videos. Some of you might have noticed the change in scenery. I'm actually back home in Colombia now, and been for the past week or so, just, regaining my bearings, getting used to the jet lag. That was a very long flight that didn't seem like it was going to end anytime soon. And yeah, just getting used to being back home, playing through an amp, and I was thinking about this week's lesson the past few days, and I thought, why not do a perspectives video again, because I haven't done one in a little while. I like to space them out relatively far, just so that, the concept doesn't get tired. But I have also been thinking about tone and sound a lot lately, and more in the physical sense of tone. And by the way, I'm just playing through the amp for this video, just to see how it sounds. If I like it, I might keep it for some videos. Don't worry, I'm still going to be using the recorded sound for some other stuff. But this is just kind of a test to see how everything's going and working with the new space and whatnot. So I wanted to talk a little bit about tone and sound because I've been messing around a little bit with touch and dynamics, and actually, if you'd been checking out my stories recently, I just raised the action a little bit on the Cardin, just because I felt it was much needed. It was actually something I was wanting to do back in Dubai, but I actually lost the little 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench that I needed to unlock the bridge so that I could raise the saddles. So something to consider. But I wanted to really cover this because I think, especially with guitar, and this applies to other instruments, but mostly guitar for whatever reason, tone seems to be a very mystical pursuit. We always say tone is in the hands, and it's very true. It's very, very true. I give this guitar to someone else, and it'll sound completely different. Likewise, if I play a different guitar, something will still be familiar, and that's because of the way I play. Or rather, I won't be able to get another person's sound out of another instrument because my entire approach is different to another person's approach. And there are a couple of factors that go into this, but I'm not going to talk about the gear side of things. I think gear is one of those things we can get caught up in, and there are also many better videos out there done by people who know a lot more about gear than I do. I just kind of tinker around, and if I find a sound I like, I usually keep it for the most part. But I wanted to talk about stuff I've been thinking about over the past year, findings from raising my action, and also talk a little bit about touch and the actual tactile influence of using, the tactile influence of tone. By the way, do bear with me, these videos are usually off the cuff, especially for perspectives, just because I like it to be a bit of a train of thought and kind of a pretty no-frills, honest look at how I think about things. So, getting right into it, I want to touch on at least the setup side of things first, just because it's a little more direct and focused. So, for the longest time, I actually don't remember the last time I changed my action. It might have been when I was still living in Boston. So, it's a long time. But I used to use a very, very low action, very low, and that's extremely easy to play. However, obviously, if you attack harder, it doesn't lend itself to a very large dynamic range, which is something we kind of forget about the guitar. The guitar itself as an instrument does have a pretty limited range compared to many other instruments, But it is possible to look for other ways of getting a larger dynamic range, having more space and room to work with. And one of those things is action, which I found out recently. Actually, I'd been meaning to raise it for a little while because I felt that I wasn't getting enough out of the instrument. And I remember doing an exercise with a mentor where we were going through different dynamic levels. So it was just taking quarter notes and taking quarter notes at a really low dynamic, go to the next one, go to the next one, and the next one, and make the transition to each dynamic instant. And all the 4 quarter notes have to be the same dynamic. So it's a really good exercise to try. And I found when I was getting to like the forte, fortissimo kind of thing, that I'd be hitting a certain level, but what I was producing out of the amplifier, or whatever it may be, software amplifier, whatever, was only coming to about here. So the instrument wasn't responding the way I wanted to, and because my playing was developing into a more dynamic style, I think the change was warranted. So a couple of things happened after I tweaked this. I just did this the other day. I raised the saddles by about half a turn. Again, it was just kind of, okay, let's tweak it, let's see what happens. And I noticed something immediate. The acoustic resonance of the instrument. Like, I'm deliberately not turning up the volume knob, but it just really breathes. So much so that my dad, who's actually partially deaf, was sitting on the other side of the room, and he, without his hearing aid, could still hear the acoustic instrument. So that says a lot about just what a simple action tweak can do. Now this resonant quality, because the string has more room to vibrate, really opens up the instrument. And I found that just as a result of that, things started feeling a little more like I heard in my head. The way I look at my tone, at least the way I visualize it, I talk more about like the creative or the artistic side of sound and tone in another video. I'll probably link it somewhere. But I visualize, and this is just kind of a sum of just everything you've heard throughout your entire musical life, but for me, the sound I'm aiming for, at least currently, is some combination of the human voice, a piano, a cello, and the guitar. It doesn't make sense, and it's pretty abstract in that sense, but that's kind of the response I'm aiming for, and it's a really hard thing to do, but one thing I've also been embracing is just the nature of the guitar, and that's why I've been embracing a brighter sound in general. So one thing I did notice was that there is a little more top end. But even all the lows and mids have now been opened up a little more. And I can actually hear more definition in lower voiced chords. Like I can hear more note separation, which is nice. And the single note stuff has more of a fullness to it. Across the entire instrument. And technically speaking, it's actually not too different, at least now. I do notice a little bit of fatigue, just a little bit after playing a long time, but that's something I think I just have to get used to, but even... I actually find notes leap out of the instrument a little better. Which is really beautiful, and that's kind of an effect I've been looking for a while. Other things I'd been considering lately is I'd been turning up my tone knob. I used to use a very low rolled off tone, like if I think even back all the way to Catharsis, or just kind of that time period, somewhere between 2018 and 2019. I had my tone on like 2.5, because at the time, that's kind of the sound I was aiming for. Uh, really dark, woody. Um, but then I started playing in more musical situations where it wasn't really called for, and I'd actually been embracing using more of the tone knob again. Actually, I'd rolled it up to about 4.5, which is where I used to keep it, um, right around my time at Berkeley, and also when I recorded Embracing Clarity. And now, because I even raised the action a little more, I'm keeping it somewhere around 5.5 or 6, because I find that otherwise the lows get too out of control, which tends to happen apparently once you raise the action a little more, because there's more room for the string to vibrate, as I was talking about. Also, just raise my pickup height a hair, but that is something to consider in how you want it to resonate, and I don't like it to be too. I don't like to. I like to get the details from like a microphone or something, but I don't like it coming from the instrument. I also find that, again, certain frequencies, if the pickup is a little too close, especially on the neck, they get a little out of control. So I just like it kind of balanced. Now, volume knob also plays a role, but I don't really fiddle around with it too much. But stuff to consider. So now I want to get into the actual technique of things, because this is something that I think causes the most confusion when it comes to sound and tone projection. I think sometimes when we think about sound, or when I have students come in, the first and foremost concern is usually, okay, how can I play the idea? And then the idea is executed, but then the idea doesn't project in the best manner possible. For example, you can take a major scale and you can see someone's worked on the major scale, they've really figured out vocabulary and lines and ideas, but something doesn't click and it doesn't translate. And this is where stuff gets really personal to each musician. In my case, for example, I use an extremely light touch. I think comes from back in like my rock and metal days, where I played with jumbo frets, and I still play with jumbo frets actually. So you didn't have to press very hard to get a note out of the guitar, and actually if you pressed too hard you would end up sending the note out of tune. But that light touch allows my chords to kind of ring out a little more. Ring more true and be more in tune, especially for some of the cluster voicings. That's where a light touch would help. And I find that for the effect I'm going for, of kind of that, as I was talking about, human voice, piano, cello, guitar hybrid, you kind of, at least for me, you do need a little bit of that control and lightness in the sound. To get kind of like that purity in the sound. I know this is getting a little abstract, but hey, this is a really strange topic to talk about, but one I think that needs addressing. And as far as left-hand technique is concerned, this applies to both left and right actually. The attack and how hard you hit can send notes out of tune, but influences, okay, how does it project? And one thing we also have to consider is the techniques we use. I'm known to be more of a legato player, so as such, my sound has that sort of fluidity to it, which I aim for. However, let's say someone wants something more percussive, think pure alternate picking or the Benson picking approach. That is a different sound. So considering your actual technique and kind of the techniques you employ can influence what your sound will be, or what you're aiming for, or what you're aiming to project, musically speaking. The other thing to consider, I think, for tone and sound, and this is now starting to get into the artistic territory of sound, is how we play our notes, the articulations, and the duration we hold each note out for. So for example, the way I play, sure, you need a control over both articulations, staccato and legato. That's non-negotiable. But I really almost try aim to have each note kind of meld and blend into the next note. Even with chords. Just basic control and exercises you can do is take scales or take phrases and lines and really listen for how each note connects into the other. Actually, that's a really good legato exercise because it'll iron out a lot of kinks in the technique that some people tend to skip. And same thing applies to your right hand, how you hit the string, how your right hand dynamic relates to your left hand dynamic. These are all things to consider for a part of tone and sound. For example, I try and make sure both my hand dynamics are pretty balanced unless I intend to call attention to something. For example, let's say if I'm playing a scale again, I try and make sure it's really balanced to get that fluid sound. And the same thing applies to now when I start expanding to a linear thing and have lots of string crossing and maybe string skipping. Now, I get this is a really broad topic, and everyone's perception of tone and sound changes as time goes on. For example, I wouldn't have thought I'd be playing with a sound like this 6-7 years ago. I wouldn't have expected my playing to have changed into the way it has, and probably if I project maybe 10 years down the line, I'm sure my sound will change exponentially over the course of that time, embracing new techniques, new ideas, new sounds, whatever it may be. But I think this is a good starting point to at least get people considering and thinking more about how they play an idea, rather than what gear to use to get the idea. I think that will come secondary in many cases. What's more important is getting what I would like to refer to as the acoustic tone production, the acoustic sound and tone production. Get that in order first, and I think you'll find ideas will translate a little more directly in your playing. So I hope this video was interesting for you guys. Let me know if you want me to do more perspective topics or any topics you want me to cover, be it, actually about guitar, tone, sound, composition, music, whatever it may be. And please do stay tuned for more videos and more lessons. I'm going to be uploading regularly now that I'm back in Colombia. I've got everything set up. I'm a little more relaxed and less stressed out these days. So yeah, hope to see you all soon in a new video, and take care.